So we're here, day 3. This time we're reviewing ABR against Rozes, or Kaladin here. Let's get into it. This is going to be a quicker video because, as you will see, the game was very quick. We have a Jinx, Mirror, and Rozes win the Love the Kiss. Now, Jinx teams lately have not really been running backup sleepers, which causes the Mirror to be a very unbalanced matchup, because whoever gets this Love the Kiss off, it's just very snowbally from there, because you are a full Pokemon up, and there's just not much else to go from here. Like, you just lose this trade. Either your Jinx wakes up quickly or you're done. So, well, this goes as far as Jinx teams with no backup sleepers are concerned. There are some people who still run Jinx plus Executor or Jinx plus Gengar, but they're not very common anymore. So we see here, ABR loses the tie, tries to wake it up. Rozes immediately goes Taurus. I think this is the correct play. You really don't want to... You want to get an advantage from this this attempt to burn a sleep turn. Because obviously if this Jinx wakes, all of a sudden the game is flipped on its head. This Lovely Kiss that is coming from this Jinx is all of a sudden very threatening, and so the position is completely reversed. So you don't want this to wake, so it is correct to go Taurus. Now, you've seen here, this is a pretty insane sequence. Body Slam into Earthquake, and then correctly reads the counter, which is actually pretty impressive. I guess Rozes had just done an extensive scouting on ABR's tendencies as far as the Snorlax sets are concerned, at least in Jinx teams. Maybe this is something that ABR does with his Jinx builds specifically to run counter-likes more often, because, you know, it's I don't think, you know, it is a reasonable play to make, because, you know, if it's Reflect, sometimes they just click Reflect here, so it's a relatively safe play to make. But still, it takes some amount of balls to click EQ there and potentially take a Body Slam on your Taurus early on. So I'm thinking this was probably scouted, but I'm not sure. Now that the counter fails, this is a very bad position for ABR already, because he has to face potential Body Slam or EQ into Hyper Beam kill on the Snorlax, and obviously you still have many Pokemon that can take a Hyper Beam in the back, but it's still not pleasant to be on the receiving side of that mind game. However, Rozes decides to opt out of that, maybe playing safe against potential self-destructs, something like that. He goes to Snorlax and it's a Body Slam safely. The Snorlax reflects. Chansey reveals Ice Beam, and Rozes Body Slams, and Soft Boiled, and Rozes explodes immediately. Now, this is a very good play by Rozes, because, as I have just explained, the Jinx is down, huge advantage. When you have an advantage, you want to trade down your mons, because you already have more resources available than your opponent, and so if you take away one Pokemon from them and one Pokemon from yourself, generally speaking, it is more restrictive on the person who already has resources available. Already has less resources available. So essentially, this is just a 1-for-1 in one of the first stages of the game. But if you force more trades, more 1-for-1 trades with your other Pokemon, then, you know, this 5v4 that you have currently can turn into something like a 3v2, which is very much more comfortable to maneuver in. Even if, you know, obviously the matchups between the Pokemon involved do matter. But generally speaking, a lot of Pokemon in RBY, they can trade with each other, if not properly 1-for-1, then at least like 1 for 80% of the other. So it's very much a thing when you have these, especially when you have explosions that are so, you know, direct in their tendency to cause 1-for-1 trades. It is notable to to keep in mind who has the status advantage, because you know this leap is important, because obviously Jinx, when you have a full team alive, is not going to be very impressive, but Jinx, when your Blizzard resists are gone, all of a sudden we're talking. And this right here is Chansey dead, one Blizzard resist gone. ABR very likely has another Psychic in the back, because you know you often do in Jinx teams, you very, very often do. But still, you know, he's running out of Blizzard answers. So we see Snorlax against Jinx here. Again, Snorlax could have stayed in here, perhaps, because it just does so much damage, and if the Body Slam paralyzes, then the Jinx is dead. But the threat of a Blizzard crit killing it, you know, it's so huge, and so ABR switches to Jinx. This is just to pivot into a Alakazam and switch into a Psychic instead of a Blizzard in order for it to take less damage. Now ABR is particularly unfortunate here because his team doesn't even have a Starmie, so his Blizzard resists are done. Well, obviously in this stage you could technically have a Starmie unrevealed, but then why would he go Alakazam instead of just going Starmie directly? That wouldn't make much sense. So it is very reasonable to guess that he doesn't have a Starmie, and indeed we will see that he does not have one. So Alakazam comes in, Thunder Waves, and now this sequence is just unfortunate. I will skip ahead, but basically Jinx never fully powers, just clicks Blizzard a lot, and Alakazam cannot recover up reliably before being frozen on this turn. Now, it was a fair amount of Blizzards hit. It was 5 Blizzards hit here, which is, you know, considerable. It's 5-10% rolls, but you do have to consider, or well, 9% with the miss chance, but you know, little difference. You do have to consider that this was through paralysis, so I think you can definitely say that ABR got unlucky here. But this was always going to be, you know, the fact that he was forced into this situation where he had to rely on not getting frozen repeatedly does say a lot about the quality of this position for Roses, because you know, whenever you have this situation where your opponent's best Blizzard switch-in takes over a third of their health, you're smiling. And so he goes Tauros on the Alakazam since it's safe. ABR tries going Jinx. Obviously has to switch it out from Alakazam, from Tauros, sorry, to Alakazam. Alakazam is sacked, and now count the months, it's 3 versus 5. This is very, very difficult. If it was difficult before, it's now even more so. Now Cloyster comes in, Blizzard's the Starmie. Now, if you're ABR here, you don't have much of a lifeline, because, you know, you just don't. You've run out of options. This Cloyster cannot exactly generate numerical advantage. Cloyster is much more of a defensive Pokemon who, you know, stops the enemy normals as long as you need them to. And then eventually, when it's not needed anymore defensively, you can explode it for a 1-for-1. So it's very rare for Cloyster to get more than a 1-for-1 trade. Generally only happens with a lucky Blizzard Freed. But you know, he has a Snorlax that has counter, so it's not rest, so it's hard for it to generate more value. And he has a Tauros, which of course is capable of killing multiple Pokemon by itself, but will need this Starmie out of the way. So all in all, well, the Jinx can wake up, but now there is a paralyzed Jinx that can just sleep lock and send it to sleep again right back. So that one is not as much of an available avenue anymore either. So as far as ABR's options goes, I do like just clicking Blizzard here, because you need something very desperate. You need to try to find a freeze on the Starmie before the Starmie kills you, because if it doesn't happen, then the game ends. And so he tries. Roses goes for Surf, predicting Jinx. I don't really like that, but it's no big deal. And then ultimately he doesn't get the freeze, so he has to be happy with hitting one Blizzard and then exploding this army, opening up for a potential, Tauros shenanigan. But the Jolteon comes out. Jolteon, of course, faster than Tauros, can Thunderwave it. This makes things very, very, very unlikely to work out for ABR. Rozes goes Chansey. Snorlax explodes immediately. I don't know if I like this play because at this stage, surely you need, as I said, generate that numerical advantage. So I think Body Slam to try and paralyze this Jolteon was going to be a very decent play. And also there is a non-zero chance that your opponent sacks Jinx here, which is not a Pokemon you want to explode, obviously. So I understand being scared of Jolteon Thunderbolting twice, but I think at this stage you have to gamble on something very lucky, like a Body Slam full para if the Jolteon stays, or Body Slam para into sort of like Hyper Beam if the Jolteon stays, or maybe Body Slam eventually creates some Chansey and then Hyper Beam finishes her off, something like that. So to self-destruct directly, as I said, when you have the numerical disadvantage, I think that is a bit short-sighted. Like maybe it is good to take out the Jolteon as soon as possible, but it's not going to win you the game in this situation, and it's not even likely to happen at all. So I think he needed to go for something that was more likely to make up the lost value from the Sleeping Jinx and the Frozen Alakazam, but he doesn't. He keeps turning 1-for-1. If you look at all the dead things, look at all the Pokemon that are out of commission right now. Yeah, you have this Snorlax, which exploded in exchange for this Chansey, and you have this Cloyster which exploded in exchange for this Starmie, and you have this Jinx which is sleeping, and this Alakazam that got frozen. Literally every Pokemon that has died or taken any significant damage at this point of the game has done so as a result of explosions or hard status like sleep or freeze. And so this is what I mean when I say numerical advantage. When you have these teams with a lot of explosions and they are not rare, you have a hard time breaking out of this 1-for-1 exchanges, because this is a team built for 1-for-1 exchanges. And it does make sense that the team is built like this, because usually with the Jinx, this team is the one to have the sleep advantage. You get to land the Lovely Kiss first, so you are 6v5, and then you explode, and so it becomes a 5v4 and a 4v3, and from there that's very easy to control to a victory. But here it is not. He lost the Lovely Kiss tie, so the thing works completely against him. It works in reverse. You have a 5v6 and you don't want to turn it into a 4v3 and a 3v2, but in this case he's sort of forced to with this Cloyster and Snorlax, which are not very good at climbing back into games. You needed to either land a Miraculous Freeze with this or Miraculous Paralysis or Crit with Snorlax. It was very difficult. So I think you can explain all of this with, obviously losing the Jinx tie, but also just bringing a team that is very much committed to snowballing whatever happens in the early turns out of proportion. And that is what explosion teams do. They, as soon as one player has the advantage, explosion, if you're behind, it's a move you don't want to click, and if you're ahead, it's a move you want to click. But if you're behind, you don't really have the luxury of not exploding sometimes. The Cloyster there, you couldn't really afford not to click it. And so the Snorlax here again, obviously I suggested the Body Slam line, but it was just not going to work very often anyway. So this is the problem with these boom teams, is that if the one thing that you rely on, which is the Jinx Lovely Kiss at the start, goes wrong, then all of a sudden you don't have the initial part of the puzzle on which you build on with all of these explosions. And so I don't think this team is bad, it's just that it's risky, especially in the Jinx mirror, because it doesn't have a backup sleeper, and because if it loses the mirror, something like Starmie and Jolteon is a lot more capable of generating those not one-for-one trades. They're a lot more capable of generating that value out of nowhere. Because Starmie can recover and it can, psychic drop and maybe with a few lucky psychics in a row, it can force a Chansey out when it's low on health and basically remove it that way. It can Thunder Wave to sort of, make the number advantage less clear because a paralyzed Pokemon that is alive isn't quite so good as it often is. It can do all sorts of these, funky, flexible things. And Jolteon, of course, just by being alive, it makes many Pokemon like Cloyster and Zapdos not really count as a full Pokemon, or not as much as they usually would. And even things like Chansey completely walled by Rest Jolteon, of course. And so this type of Jinx team, it's not as reliable on the tie. And Rozes, if he had lost the Lovely tie, he probably could have played this game. It wasn't advantage, but it probably was more playable than it ended up being for ABR, who was so committed to this one original game plan. And so we see here that he tries to wake Jinx, doesn't happen, and now Tauros would have to crit EQ and crit Hyper Beam, and then probably crit Body Slam on Jinx would be the higher odds there, but it just doesn't happen. It's absolutely astronomically low odds. He just gets paralyzed and then killed by the Jolteon. Doesn't even need to bring the Tauros in. So a quick 30 turn game, not very much to analyze because it's just not very much to analyze in terms of plays because it's all very straightforward and it's not very long. There's not many turns to even analyze, but there is a lot to say about the nature of Jinx builds here and the nature of the mirror. Of course, unfortunate that ABR lost the tie and then got frozen, but I think even without this freeze, he was already very disadvantaged because of, as I said, the nature of his team when he loses the Jinx tie. So sometimes this is how it goes in RBY. You bring a team that is a little lopsided, a little too tunnel focused on one plan. And this is why Starmie is so popular lately, is because it's such a flexible Pokemon. If things go wrong, Starmie is still going to be pretty good. Like, he's just so flexible in so many situations. You can always get value out of him. Well, very often get value out of him. There are situations in which it's that way as well, but compared to most Pokemon, and especially compared to this explosion one-dimensional teams, Starmie is very flexible, and so yeah, this is why Starmie is popular. Very rare appearance of a Starmie-less team here. Unfortunately for ABR, did not work out, but I don't think the team is bad. It's just that it has these negative matchups where if you lose the Jinx side, the game ends. Perhaps there is some argument to be made for, he knew he was playing such a team. He should have switched out to just absorb the Lovely Kiss on something like Cloyster and go back to Jinx and just trade it. But then, of course, you're playing with a Jinx that is, awake and available, and your opponent is playing with a real Pokemon because it just sleep-sacked theirs. So, it's not really good even then. But I think at least it makes it more playable because your Alakazam is alive and your Chansey is alive and your Snorlax is alive, and it's it's closer. And especially if there is like a Rhydon in the back, which of course is not the case here, but there are scenarios in which a Jinx in the back is usable. And I mean, there was even the self-destruct Snorlax to get Chansey killed. So there is some degree of space for this Jinx to cause trouble. But of course, when that never materialized, perhaps it is a line that should be investigated when you bring a team such as ABR's, which just loses hard if it gets Lovely Kissed. So yeah. This wasn't as much game analysis, it was more team analysis, because the game itself was very uninteresting as a result of the teams that were brought. So I hope you learned something from this, even if it isn't very much about the players who played, it's more about the teams that they brought. But yeah, I hope it was interesting in some form anyway. And I will see you tomorrow for SoulWind's next match. See you, and thanks for watching.